just a brief bit of news. This was floating around late yesterday. Somebody inadvertently took a photograph of Brisbane's plans to take on Essendon. This happened yesterday. Mitch Cleary has now posted it.
Yeah.
There is a whiteboard. It is basically every Essendon player who's playing today. Strengths and weaknesses for every player.
Give us a juicy one, Caro. There.
Ben McKay, low confidence. Zach Merritt, selfish.
Wow.
There's another selfish. I think there's Langford. Yeah, he's another selfish. It goes on. Now, there are theories about
this. Fumbly kicking.
What are the theories? Because you don't want, this is a confidential discussion document thing that's become public now. How did it become public?
Durham, hothead.
For instance.
Durham, hothead. Now, what is interesting is that there's a former Essendon player now in the Brisbane team.
Sam Draper.
A former ruckman who a lot of the players that there aren't that many details about.
Right.
Don't seem to have as much detail. Who are new to the club, who haven't played with Draper much, don't seem to have as much written about them. So, could Sam Draper have been delivering this intel? I cannot believe. I don't know how this was managed to be. The security was so bad that it got out. There's a lot of L's. I assume that means left footer, Laura.
And just the language around it, just the language on it. I mean, I assume that's just something that you do, Leigh, as a coach. Do you identify, how often would you identify those sort of characteristics like selfish, hothead?
Well, a view. I mean, but it's not. It's
no
not,
right foot, temper.
Yeah.
Yep.
But those kind of things, when you're doing the review of the opposition, you might be making a comment. I mean, you're not going to go and have a page on each player, for instance. That gets too complicated. So it's not unusual. But it's just embarrassing if something like that sees the light of day.
Someone has set the cat amongst the pigeons.
Chris Fagan would be mortified.
You would be mortified because this is something we're talking about. That's not meant to be for public consumption.
And is it private
or the
information?
Opposition, for that matter.
I mean, is there copyright? I mean, is there anything
I don't know.
untoward that's happened here except that a window was left open and a bloke or a woman, I think a bloke, took the photograph?
You would assume those meetings are in confidence. So if you're going to take a photo, I don't know whether or not
that looks like the kind of thing. It's a document. So there was a document that might have got handed out to each of the players.
It's on a whiteboard.
I don't know how they do it. Oh, if it's on a whiteboard, that's different. Someone's taken a photo of a whiteboard. Okay, well that is intervening in the security of a place.
Last night, 2 matches, Freo too good for the Dogs, but the showdown came down to the final minute, an absolute thriller. Do we think though it's time the AFL showed the showdown more respect? It didn't get the prime time slot that the Dogs Freo did. It was on free to air in South Australia, but it's been scheduled as a double header. What do you think, Cara?
I've been calling for the showdown to come to primetime TV, be it Friday night, Saturday night, for years, or Thursday night. I can't understand why Channel 7 and the AFL don't back it. I understand the thinking with Channel 7 that Victorians want a Victorian team. But I think the Bulldogs Fremantle obviously held some interest and ended up being an intriguing game. And Bulldogs, with all their issues, performed admirably. But I think if 7 1 year threw everything behind this showdown, they've got Kane Corns as one of their key people now. They've got so many brilliant storylines from that game. And as it turned out, Laura, last night, I mean, I don't know about you, but I was switching between 2 different networks. I just think, and I understand the new Saturday deal the AFL have struck, and the fact that in South Australia they couldn't have showed it on a Saturday because it would have been on an hour and a half delay on free-to-air, which is just disgraceful, but that's another story. That's part of the new Saturday deal with Fox Footy. I think they need to back it and give it a go because, I mean, we won't know until we give it a go. Give it a couple of primetime Friday nights and see what happens. At the moment, you've got... I know the 2 teams who are in the bottom end ruins of the ladder, they always put on an incredible game. It ended up being a 1-point game full of controversy, which we'll talk about in a moment.
Yep.
Yet another embarrassing stuff
I
up
hate the arc.
in front of all the footy bosses and, in fact, in front of the AFL chairman. If that doesn't force another rethink, I don't know what will. But, Yeah, I was disappointed. I was
Yep.
disappointed it wasn't. It was behind a paywall for Victorians.
We want you to get involved in the conversation, so your call's welcome on the Nick Theodosi open line, 133 693. Nick Theodosi Prestige Cars, 55 years in business. Everybody should own a Prestige car at least once in a lifetime. Now, Leigh, we had 23,000 at Marvel Stadium last night, which is a pretty modest crowd for a Friday night game. Showdown, 53,000, packed house, as you'd imagine, for a match like that. What do you think in terms of the prime time debate?
I don't think the Showdown's as big deal as Caro does. When you talk
Why not?
Why it's one game between, why is it better than there's the derbies? I mean, there's the
Yep.
there's a lot of big games.
Yep, better
What I'm saying,
rivalry than all of those.
It's a big well, yeah, for South Australians it is. For me, and I don't talk on behalf of the national audience, I only talk for myself. Yeah, it's good. But I don't think it's that big deal that I'm going to go out of my way to go and see the Showdown or watch the Showdown compared to other games. The things we've got to note in all this, and this is what the broadcasters, Channel 7 made the call last night. They decided to have the free-to-air coverage around the country on the Bulldogs game, the Bulldogs-Freo game. They could have done the Showdown game, but they think the audience is bigger. So the question marks, the national audience interest level in the Showdown, I think is questionable. I don't think it's going to be as great as Caro thinks it might be one day. And the Victorian audience is always the biggest audience for the broadcasters. So if you talk about the television people, the people who turn up and go to the footy, there's 50,000 at the Showdown, that's fine. That's the Adelaide. It's a bit like Gather Round. Fantastic and big in Adelaide. Not sure it's huge around the country. So on that basis, I'm not sure whether we need to go adjusting things to have the Showdown. For instance, what you're saying, Caro, is the Showdown should be a standalone Friday night game, for instance.
Give it a go. And you say, I think as a football lover of the entire national game, to me this is one of the most exciting games on the footy calendar. It's a far better rivalry than the derby. It's as good a rival. Anzac Day is a great occasion, but I wouldn't say it's been a great rivalry in recent years.
No.
And I'd absolutely dispute Gather Round. I mean, everyone I know from all around the country watched Gather Round on their TVs.
You've got a choice.
And loved it.
Well, you've got a choice. Gather Ground is fantastic for Adelaide. I'm not
poorly fixtured games
I
this
still
year.
don't think the rest of the country was into Gather Round as the Adelaide people are. But anyway, nevertheless, the point you're saying is if you start putting the Showdown on the Friday night, a time slot, so it's in the national audience, eventually it's going to become one of the really big raters. That's your view.
I think they should.
You might be right.
I don't know for certain, but how will we ever know unless
you won't know
unless we have a crack. So you've got the Showdown going free-to-air into South Australia because of this crazy deal that they can't do it on a Saturday before round 9. Otherwise, it has to be on delay. You've got Fremantle going on free-to-air live into WA. So everyone's sort of happy in their home states. But I would say I would have rather, if I didn't have pay TV, if I had a choice, I would have rather the Showdown last night.
As I say, I don't talk for the national audience. This is my viewing. I had Fox.
So
I started watching the Bulldogs game. At half-time, I went and had a look at the Showdown game for 20 minutes, and then I came back and watched the whole Bulldogs-Freo game, and then I watched the last quarter of the Showdown. So, I don't speak for the national audience, but that was my preference.
See, the same thing happened earlier this year with the Battle of the Bridge in Sydney, which I don't think is as good a rivalry as the Showdown.
No,
that popped the double fixture.
It's becoming, a really good rivalry. This is indisputably, in my view, the greatest rivalry in the national game. And it's no coincidence, Laura, that you had Craig Drummond, Andrew Dillon, Greg Swan and Andrew Ireland, arguably the foremost senior footy people, either on the commission or on the executive, all there. And hopefully they saw enough to say to Seven next year, why don't you have a crack?
And this is in a week.
But you only say have a crack because you think the ratings will end up being bigger.
Potentially.
Eventually. That's your premise.
Yeah, I don't like... I understand why they do the double headers on a Friday night, but when there's only a half hour or less delay, I think it's really tough on the viewer.
Well, the free-to-air viewers have got no choice. They can only watch what Seven decide to put on around the country.
I would argue in this case that the Showdown would have rivalled Bulldogs v Fremantle.
For Seven. But Seven chose to. Admittedly, they do their fixturing. Seven also do it months ago. They don't do it sort of a couple of weeks ahead.
But I agree, given last year we were having this debate because Essendon got a lot of the primetime games on Thursday, Friday night. And we had some horrible matches on Thursday and Friday night at points in the season. Whereas I think with the Showdown, it delivers. It always delivers. That's my view on
Did
it.
last night.
It did last night.
You know,
it always
it
does.
always popped up that late in a game you can have
It's
a few.
spice.
You're going to kick a goal a minute for a few minutes, right?
I know, that's your
That's
philosophy.
my little thing, right?
Yeah.
Well, last night they kicked 2 goals
In the last
minute or the last 50
Yeah,
seconds.
your rule was broken.
I was that aside. I mean, that was just
Tested.
unbelievable viewing. But the viewing here was outstanding too. The Bulldogs Freo game had its ebbs and flows, and that was a fantastic game to watch. So I wasn't going to leave that to go to the Showdown, but I was glad I watched the last quarter of the Showdown, particularly that last minute when. Like, the emotional roller coaster of this game is incredible, isn't it? Whether
Laura,
it's the
I would not have
Thursday
wanted
night,
to be on that bridge, leaving the Adelaide Oval, walking over the Torrens had Adelaide lost.
Yeah.
Because that Sligo decision, when he's kicked a magnificent goal, you couldn't have told really whether, I'm sure in the arc.
Oh, you mean the
whether-
Miller
one
goal?
over the top of the post. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, I thought it was Sligo. Have I got that wrong?
No. The Malira one was the one where they paid the free kick on the goal
yes, you're
line,
right.
No, I think
which
it was
is very
Sligo.
unusual.
Yep.
The Sligo was the one that went over the post. About 3
Everyone's
metres
cheering, everyone's celebrating. It took felt like nearly 2 minutes that they took the time to review when the goal umpire could not have been in a better position than anyone. It was in the best position of anyone. Adelaide did not get the rub of the green again. In a way, and they had so many more inside 50s. In a way, thank heavens they won, because I would not have been a pretty sight.
Oh, no. You wouldn't want
After
to
the
leave the
game.
ground after those
But
decisions.
the footy the last 3 nights. I mean, the Thursday
It's the
night
Libya,
game, which were
hasn't
the draw with the last kick,
Yep.
and last night's game. I mean, the 3 games. If you talk about the game as a spectacle and the excitement and the emotional roller coaster, God, football's never been better. I mean, we can talk about a lot of things that nitpick on minutiae, but the game and what it's providing for us watchers is just outstanding.
Well, you would say that the people outside the fence are doing their best to stuff it up, but even they can't stuff it up because they lucked onto a product.
Andrew Dillon, he got
years
booed.
ago.
We do jump on minutiae.
Andrew Dillon got booed when he was showed on the screen.
I
at
would
the
not
Showdown.
say that ARC decision was minutiae.
No, that's true.
I would not
You know-
say the tribunal stuff-ups in recent weeks have been
well,
minutiae.
they're one-offs. But anyway, that aside,
They keep happening.
In the Arc, I've never been in the Arc. Have you ever been in the Arc, Caro,
Yeah,
for instance?
I have,
But
yeah.
so that one over the post, have they got a situation where it's like they can put almost a laser beam that goes up from the post, to an indefinite height to. Otherwise, judging the ones whether they're over the post, inside
Look at
or out,
Caro's
seems
face.
like an Arc. Why are the Arc intervening in those kind of decisions?
Laura, I spoke to a very well-known football elder this morning who I bumped into at a coffee shop, and he was in the ARC in recent weeks for a presentation. He said, if I'd had a hand grenade in my pocket, I would have dropped it just to, once everyone was gone, just blow it up.
Yep.
Just blow it up and start again.
The one over the post, I can't understand why they think they can make that call. But anyway, that's a different situation. I still think the fact that when there's an obvious mistake can be remedied, that's better than not having it at all.
I think you go with human error.
Oh, you're getting rid of the Arc completely.
I've come around to that now.
Yeah, I also am
hasn't
coming
worked,
around to that idea. In terms of, we talk about minutiae and topics this week, Paul Guerra certainly wasn't. Shock exit as Melbourne CEO. More details sort of coming out now about the backroom workings that led up to it.
Everyone's leaking against each other now.
Oh, gosh. And when it's leaking, it hasn't been a happy situation, has it? What's the latest that you're aware of, Caro?
Well, the situation was not good from the start. He was appointed when Stephen Smith was on the board but not president. Stephen Smith had a preferred candidate, Keith Thomas, from Export Adelaide. For one very important reason, Keith Thomas was exited because of an unfortunate social media post he'd put on a long time earlier involving Palestine. Obviously, Melbourne have Jewish board members and are dealing with some pretty heavy Jewish lobby groups, including Mount Scopus, to try and get a new home in Caulfield. First red flag. Second red flag, Paul Guerra gets the job, then reveals he can't start for 6 months. Then he's talking to the media before he's got the job about the new coach. Then he appears to be totally removed from the process of the new home at Caulfield. He's at odds with the board over whether Caulfield is ever going to happen. It doesn't look great. I mean, they need $100 million, I think, from the state government. I can't see it happening, and it won't happen for years. He wants to put Waverley in as Melbourne's new, at least temporary home. The board don't want to because they think that will harm Caulfield. Then you have the meeting with all the players' wives and girlfriends involving an incident with Stephen May. Paul Guerra should, in the view of the board, and Stephen Smith told us this, taken over that meeting and not have allowed Alan Richardson to say the things he said, which could have got Melbourne into a lot of trouble legally because someone taped the meeting. Then you've got the fact that Stephen Smith and Paul Guerra have nothing in common. They disagree on, their styles are so different. Paul is, very much a salesman, a spruiker, hail fellow, well met, loves talking to the media, is very congenial and clearly a good bloke. But he's just the opposite style of what Stephen Smith is. Then you've got the mention in a Mick Warner-Stephen Drill article in the Herald Sun about Yang Nguyen, the alleged Geelong former major sponsor and alleged fraudster who was involved in a racehorse syndicate with Paul Guerra. Melbourne are not saying that had anything to do with his departure, but they won't comment on it. No one's suggesting Paul Guerra has done anything untoward here. Then, what is leaked to Alice Costa in the Herald Sun yesterday is that Paul Guerra invited Jim Steins' widow, Samantha, to the recent Jim Steins Irish game, and that people on the Melbourne board, notably Jeff Paws, who's running the Caulfield negotiation, and who is the vice president, who was briefly married to Samantha Steins, was not happy about that. Now, it is true that Jeff Paws and Samantha do not get on. I mean, I don't think they speak. But I'm told that this was not in any way a red flag and that no one had any issue with Sam Steins being there. They just didn't think she would want to come and they were happy for her to be there. But this is a level that we're getting to. You've got a guy on a one-year contract, so they weren't sure about him anyway. He clearly probably wants more than the 6-month payout they're offering. So it's a mess. But in my view, Leigh, if they didn't like him, they didn't want him, it's good they've done what they've done.
I agree with you. The reasons, to me, don't matter a whole lot. I reckon there's a couple of partnerships at a footy club that are critical. And the partnership between the chairman and the CEO is a critical one.
Yep.
So then the chairman appoints the CEO. He's higher up the chain, chairman of the footy club, president, chairman, same title. So if the chairman, president doesn't think this CEO is going to be a good partner for us to run the footy club, then you've got to make the change.
That relationship
it's the same with footy.
You need to have a good relationship there.
Footy managers and senior coaching can say the same. Senior coaching, captain, come leadership group. The partnership between those are critical in a footy club. So if the chairman decides that this is not the CEO that's going, I want as my partner in doing the best for the footy club, you make the change.
Oh, let's wait and see the fallout.
Just when you think another good, there's no more stories could happen in a week.
I know, it's been a busy week.
Innocent old Brisbane v Essendon. What could possibly go wrong?
We've got a call on the Nick Theodosi open line that we'll get to now. Hello, Nathan. Nathan, you there?
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Having good chuckle there. I've got some ties at Essendon. That's gold. Just going back to the arc, obviously not going to solve that problem, but with regard to the point, goal, the ball over the point for the goal post for behind or a goal. I'm electrical. I work with laser technology. You run a vertical laser straight up. It's not going to be expensive and very easy to tell whether the ball's run over the post or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was wondering whether they had that in the arc. That's why I asked Kara. I've never been in the arc, so
no.
because otherwise you'd think the arc people would say, well, it's not conclusive enough to overturn the umpire unless they somehow or other can increase the length of the post to see would it have been intersected with the football. I don't know. If that facility is in place, okay, then there might be a reason for intervening. Otherwise, leave it alone.
It's layers upon layers for me.
The goal umpires don't get that many wrong.
No,
honestly, Tom Hawkins has got a lot to answer for, I reckon.
Tom Hawkins. We want to get to Ross Lyon quickly because I know, Caro, you were at the forefront of that, of speaking about the coach and his interactions with some of his Indigenous players. Ross verified your story, and here's what he had to say.
That was an accurate story. Culture is really important and behaviour is really important, and I made an error unintentionally. She had the story and I didn't shy away from it, and everything's accurate.
I liked what he had to say after the fact. I was, pretty impressed with how he handled it. I thought it was fine that it was handled in-house. I know the AFL made some inquiries after the fact, but no official complaint had been lodged. Then in the wake of it, I noticed that some of the players that were involved came out and said, "We love Ross the Boss" on social media, just to reinforce that they were behind him. But it does sound like in this instance, this type of story has been handled well. Is that your view?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I had heard there were whispers going around that Nazai Wanganeen-Malira was flat with Ross for some reason, and there was some, and that is a very important relationship, as we know, Leigh, at the St Kilda Football Club. Yeah. And those two were very close, and we know Ross has a long history with Indigenous footballers, and generally it's been a brilliant relationship. You know, Michael Walters credits him with saving his career. So many other stories. But to Ross's credit, when I rang him about this, and I then found out it was a larger group, and that Brad Hill had become involved. I didn't know whether it was Ross or another coach who had made these comments that had raised the eyebrows and offended some of his Indigenous players. To his credit, he came clean straight away. He told me what he'd said, which was a comment about the brother-boy connection in a training drill. And we've got to remember we're part of a bigger team. And then Brad Hill had said to him, well, look, you wouldn't say that about the white players. Now, some people would argue, well, there are more white players. But there are a lot of Indigenous players at St Kilda. I just wish when people had a gripe, they aired it as confidently and bravely and self-assuredly as Brad Hill did. I know he didn't like the fact the story came out, but good on him for saying that, because I think back in the days of Cyril Rioli at Hawthorn, when I spoke to Cyril years later about why he'd resigned when he did and the problems he'd had, things had festered with him that he had never brought up. That had he raised them with Alistair Clarkson, I think Alistair Clarkson would have been so happy to address them. But when it all came out later, Alistair was shocked.
Yep.
And rightly so. So, you know, I think it was handled well. I was a bit surprised that Carl Delena, the CEO, hadn't known about it. But Ross told his footy boss, Lenny Hayes, who seems to have really stepped up in that role. And, look, you're always happy when someone says your story is accurate, Laura, because they don't always say that.
Oh, well, everyone else just assumes it's not if that person doesn't come out and say it. And just quickly, because we are approaching the bounce or ball up, Essendon's just run through their banner. I noticed your article today as well, speaking about the subcommittee panel. What word are we using to describe?
The AFL are now saying it's a working group, even though...
Oh, there's another word. There's another term. Okay.
On their website, it was their own AFL media, it was called a subcommittee. 16 men and women, 2 women, 14 men, to look at how to improve list spots and the mechanisms to get more Indigenous players back into the game. This has upset some of the biggest Indigenous names in the country. I spoke to 3 of them, Sean Burgoyne, Michael O'Loughlin and Sonny Michael Walters. And so many others have come out on social media questioning the absence of Paul Vandenberg and others who they feel should have been represented. The NT, WA, Queensland, New South Wales, more AFLW women. I think the AFL have, if nothing else, made a major communication stuff up here.
Yeah, I think there needs to be more accurate representation, particularly no one from the NT in your article. Leigh, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it looks like a big committee. There's 16 people on it currently. The question is should they have more, or should they have him or her? Or I mean, they form these bodies. I guess you can anyone who's not on them can beef a bit why I'm on.
Engage with your stakeholders would be my...
Yeah, no, but that's a lot of stakeholders too.
No, but just let them know. Let your most senior Indigenous staffer know that you're setting up a subcommittee, even if he's not on it.
Well, we've only had half an hour today to discuss these issues from the week. There's been plenty of them. There'll be more to come with this, what do we call it, whiteboard gate? What name are we giving this, the leaking of the Brisbane whiteboard?
I'm looking forward to seeing Zach Merritt getting the... Selfish, am I?
Selfish Zach Merritt.